In 2020, a shadow named COVID-19 spread across the globe, putting the world in an era of uncertainty. Cities halted, replaced by an eerie silence, marking the start of a story that ultimately led to a world full of skepticism. Skepticism for experts, for authority, and most alarmingly for each other. Like cataclysms such as World War I and II, the death of JFK and MLK and 9/11, the era of COVID may be one of the most controversial chapters in our human evolution, though it will undoubtedly be written by the victors in mainline historic literature. Did humanity demonstrate a complete lack of resilience in its tacit consent to absurdly restrictive measures on individual liberties? George Carlin once jibed that the people don't have any rights, because rights can't be taken away. We thereby have an ever-shrinking list of narrowly defined privileges that can be allowed and removed at will by the political class. Perhaps that is a truism? Did the silent majority allow or even encourage political opportunism? Did we allow tyrannical governments with their laws and directives, medical professionals with their unwillingness to oppose mask and vaccine mandates, to take hold of a societal narrative? If so, who was this narrative written by and why? Was there any rigor in the scientific basis for the measures taken? From some well-informed corners, it's been suggested that there was and currently is a total lack of resilience on the part of the mRNA shots themselves, which, notwithstanding increasing evidence pertaining to their crippling side effects, prevented neither infection nor transmission. Hence, it is crucial that such a grotesquely improper narrative be properly countered, in order that our history holds true to how things actually played out. The official narrative that played out worldwide was one of defense. As Australia braced against an alleged impending health crisis, power was quickly centralized. Public health measures swiftly came into effect, legislating mandates that seemed to completely fail to balance freedom and safety. A large-scale public relations campaign was unleashed with devastating effects. Government co-opted private corporations and media organizations via funding, as well as the recruitment of celebrities to push the message that we were all in it together, highlighting a national commitment. The question remains, though, what was the commitment to? Has the COVID era been marked by a commitment to cooperation, with good-hearted people doing the best they could under the circumstances? Or will history recount that COVID marked a collective silence that crushed dissenting voices, alternative pathways, scientific investigation, human rights, and any resistance to state control? Day after day, at the epicenter of the catastrophe in Melbourne, Victoria, Dan Andrews fronted Themedia for long press conferences. Daily statistics ran across the screens that were being beamed into every household every minute of every hour of every day with the so-called case numbers, creating fear and panic in the wake of the doomed communities and economies. Meanwhile, state-run media continually reported that while public spaces were deserted, hospitals were at capacity. Vaccines were heralded as the savior to the problem that perhaps government had introduced. That is, lockdowns had become the strategy of choice to control the movement of people and therefore the virus. In Victoria, lockdowns lasted for a total of 260 days, spanning 2 years, and much of the public, exhausted by lockdown fatigue, signed up to be vaccinated so that they could finally visit the cafes and keep their jobs. Notwithstanding public outrage from a silenced minority, vaccines were rolled out to a reported 95% of the workforce. The government objective had been obtained beyond even their wildest imaginations. In the public psyche, vaccines have long played a role in Australia's fight against infectious diseases. Within the population, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, Australia's regulatory authority for therapeutic goods, has been entrusted to ensuring that vaccines meet stringent safety and efficacy standards before they are approved for use in the country. Before COVID, a vaccine was expected to significantly reduce, if not eradicate, infection and transmission. The mRNA shots don't seem to do either with any certainty. Moreover, unlike traditional vaccines, they do not so much trigger the immune system's response towards disease as totally override it on a cellular level, which means again that mRNA shots do not function in any way as do traditional vaccines. So, are mRNA shots vaccines at all? Moreover, their safety record, even as verified by the VAERS reporting system in the USA, DANs in Australia, and yellow card in the UK, which typically represents at best around 10% of the rate of incidence, already reveals an alarmingly high rate of adverse side effects, which in former times would have seen the mRNA technology instantly removed from the shelves nationwide and indeed globally. Wherever mRNA jabs go, trouble seems to follow. In Australia, in order to have the COVID vaccines approved for emergency use, there couldn't be any other treatments on the market. Western governments around the world, with the help of state-based media, outlawed, banned, and slandered alternative therapies such as ivermectin and hydrochloroquine. The most infamous example being the mocking of Joe Rogan on his podcast by powerful mainstream news entities that suggested he was pushing a horse dewormer as a potential treatment. In Australia, at least, the government authority TGA may have proven itself to be incompetent, if not disingenuous, and potentially even corrupt. With regards to both the vaccines and the alternative treatments, the remotest degree of scrutiny reveals that most people took the shot not for fear of a virus, but because they wanted to keep their jobs and be able to visit cafes and board a plane, privileges that had been removed. This is all but self-evident. There would be no need to force people into compliance via such draconian measures as were employed if people were truly afraid of contracting a given disease. Moreover, the mRNA resulted in neither prevention of infection nor transmission, despite earlier claims to the contrary, revealing that this media passage may have been fallacious, which no clear-thinking person could or should take seriously. It would not be at all difficult today to do a survey of how many among those who took not a single mRNA shot died from COVID. And it is necessary to do so, given that the criteria for an unvaccinated person has constantly shifted. That is, shifted away from a person not having received a single shot. That is, the unvaccinated category indeed includes those who were at some stage vaccinated for COVID. Hence, such information regarding the so-called unvaccinated population is grossly misleading. It is to be recommended that credited mainstream journalists worldwide approach these so-called skeptics, inclusive of the freedom fighters, and hear their side of the story relating to deleterious side effects from COVID and deaths among their members. Why is the media so hesitant to enter into such a simple mode of inquiry, preferring to rely upon abstract models based upon data fatally encumbered by such skewed definitions as to what constitutes an unvaccinated person? There are a myriad of different narratives that all interplayed in the COVID era. The mystery and backtracking of authorities around the origin of the so-called virus and whether, as it now is reported, was born of a lab leak in Wuhan. The use of PCR tests that were never intended to be used as they were, which in large part lead to the fear-based mass psychosis that underpinned their removal of rights and mandating of medical treatments. The government media cooperative that silenced alternative ideas and derided large sections of the community that simply wanted the truth. The narrative around vaccines that painted otherwise immoral and unethical giant pharma corporations as instantly trustworthy and heroic. And finally, the narrative that vaccines saved lives and vaccines protect lives, when it is becoming painfully clear that it will always be the same things that lead to the best health outcomes. Good food, exercise, hygiene, friends, family, liberty, and of course the truth.